Silent Hill 2 is not just a game, it's a legendary piece of gaming history. First released in 2001, it redefined the survival horror genre by offering a deep, psychological narrative that explored themes far beyond what they typically see in horror games. This was not just a game about surviving monsters. It was about facing the darkest parts of the human soul. Silent Hill 2, developed by Team Silent, was a groundbreaking achievement for its time, and to this day, it remains one of the most beloved and analyzed video games ever made. Fast forward to the present, and we now have a remake of this iconic title, developed by Bloober Team. Fans have been waiting for years to return to the fog-drenched streets of Silent Hill, with mixed feelings of anticipation and trepidation. Could this remake do justice to the original? Would it be able to recreate the immersive atmosphere and emotional depth that made Silent Hill 2 such a classic? Or would it fall victim to modern trends that often dilute the essence of beloved game? These are the questions fans have been asking ever since the remake was announced. In this review, we're going to break down every aspect of the Silent Hill 2 remake, what it gets right, where it might stumble, and whether or not it holds a candle to the original. We'll be diving deep into the story, the visual overhaul, gameplay mechanics, sound design, and of course, the overall horror experience. By the end of this video, we hope to answer the ultimate question: does the Silent Hill 2 remake truly capture the spirit of the original? Or does it stray too far into modernity, losing what made the original game so iconic in the first place? Let's start by talking about the original Silent Hill 2 and why it is regarded as one of the greatest horror games of all time. Released for the PlayStation 2, the game was a follow-up to the first Silent Hill, but it was more of a spiritual sequel than a direct continuation of the storyline. While the first game focused on cults, rituals, and other external horrors, Silent Hill 2 took a radically different approach by focusing on internal struggles, guilt, and psychological torment. The horror came not just from the grotesque creatures or the eerie setting, but from the protagonist's own mind. James Sunderland, the game's protagonist, arrives in Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his deceased wife, Mary. The letter beckons him to come to their special place, raising questions right from the start. How could Mary, who died years ago, have written him a letter? Is James imagining it? What does Silent Hill have to do with all of this? As James ventures deeper into the town, it becomes clear what this is no ordinary journey. Silent Hill acts as a mirror, reflecting the guilt and inner demons of those who enter it. The game is filled with symbolism. Take, for example, Pyramid Head, one of the most iconic video game monsters of all time. This hulking, terrifying figure is more than just a mindless enemy. It represents James' guilt and desire for punishment. The other monsters James encounters are similarly symbolic, each representing different aspects of his psyche. The town itself feels like a living, breathing entity, constantly shifting and warping to reflect the mental state of its visitors. The game's story is complex, layered, and filled with ambiguity. There's no right or wrong way to interpret Silent Hill 2, and that's what makes it so compelling. Players have been debating the meaning of the game for years, and that debate is still ongoing. Silent Hill 2 doesn't hold your hand or explain everything explicitly. Instead, it trusts the player to piece things together, creating a narrative that feels both personal and universal. Now let's talk about one of the most anticipated aspects of the Silent Hill 2 remake, the visuals. The original game, released on the PlayStation 2, was constrained by the hardware limitations of the time. However, these limitations often worked in the game's favor. The fog that permeated every corner of Silent Hill wasn't just an atmospheric choice, it was a technical necessity. The PS2 couldn't render distant environments, so the developers used fog to cover up the game's draw distance issues. But what started as a technical limitation quickly became one of the most iconic features of this series. The fog created a sense of claustrophobia and mystery, making players feel like they were always on the verge of discovering something terrifying. In the remake, the fog is back, but now it's powered by modern graphical technology. The environments in the remake are far more detailed than they were in the original. The streets of Silent Hill are now filled with crumbling buildings, overgrown vegetation, and layers of grime would make the town feel more decayed and abandoned than ever before. The fog, while still present, now feels more dynamic, shifting and swirling around the player in ways that add to the atmosphere. However, while the enhanced visuals are immersive, this is a delicate balance that needs to be maintained. The original game's abstract and minimalist environments contributed to its surreal, dreamlike atmosphere. In the remake, the increased level of detail can sometimes make the town feel too real. Silent Hill is supposed to feel like a place that exists between reality and nightmare, and there are moments in the remake where it feels a bit too grounded. For example, in the original, the walls of the overworld, the twisted rusted version of Silent Hill, were often vague and undefined, giving the immersion that the town itself was a living entity. In the remake, the walls are more detailed, with defined textures and objects. While this adds to the visual fidelity, it can sometimes detract from the oppressive, disorienting feeling that the original's more abstract environments evoked. That said, there are moments where the remake's visuals shine. The monster designs in particular have been updated in terrifying ways. Pyramid Head, for example, is more grotesque and menacing than ever before. The enchanted graphics allow for more detailed textures and animations, making the creatures even more disturbing. The environments too have moments of brilliance, especially in the overworld sections, where the game's surreal, nightmarish imagery is on full display. Sound design has always been a crucial element of Silent Hill experience, and the remake doesn't disappoint in this department. Akira Yamaoka's original score for Silent Hill 2 is widely regarded as one of the best video game soundtracks ever composed. The haunting, melancholic melodies perfectly captured the emotional and psychological turmoil of the characters, while the industrial sound spaces added to their oppressive atmosphere. In the remake, Yamaoka's score returns, but it has been updated and reinterpreted in certain areas. The new versions of the classic tracks still maintain the eerie, unsettling tone of the original, but with modern instrumentation and production techniques would give them a fresh sound. However, for purists, the original soundtrack is still available as an option, allowing players to experience the game with the music what made the original so iconic. Gameplay is another area where the Silent Hill 2 remake has made significant updates. The original Silent Hill 2, like many games of its era, had somewhat clunky controls. The 10 controls in particular were a product of their time, and while they contributed to the feeling of helplessness, they could also be frustrating to modern players. In the remake, the controls have been modernized, making James more agile and responsive. This is a welcome change for those who found the original's controls cumbersome, but it also raises a question: does making the game more accessible also make it less scary? One of the core principles of survival horror is the feeling of vulnerability. In the original Silent Hill 2, the arcade controls and limited combat options made every encounter with a monster feel like a life or death situation. You didn't feel like a powerful action hero, you felt like a regular person just trying to survive. In the remake, James moves and fights more fluidity, which can reduce some of that tension. That said, the remake still retains much of the survival horror DNA of the original. Ammunition is scarce, health items are limited, and running away is often a better option when fighting. The combat system has also been revamped. In the original, combat was simplistic, with James wielding a variety of melee weapons and firearms, but with clunky animations and limited maneuverability. In the remake, the combat feels more polished, with smoother animations and more responsive controls. However, the game doesn't go overboard with action, it still emphasizes survival over combat prowess, ensuring that every encounter with an enemy feels dangerous and unsettling. One area where the remake shines is in its puzzles. Silent Hill 2 was known for its challenging and often cryptic puzzles, which were integral to the experience. The remake retains these puzzles, and in some cases they've been expanded or reimagined to take advantage of modern technology. However, the core philosophy remains the same. These puzzles are designed to make you think, adding an additional layer of tension as you try to solve them while knowing what something terrifying could be lurking just around the corner. At the heart of Silent Hill 2 is its story, and the remake stays faithful to the original's narrative. James Sunderland's journey to Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his deceased wife Mary is just as compelling now as it was in 2001. The game's exploration of guilt, grief, and psychological torment still resonates, and the remake doesn't shy away from the darker, more mature themes what made the original so impactful. The game's narrative remains a slow burn, gradually revealing the layers of James' guilt and the true nature of his relationship with Mary. Silent Hill as a town acts as a reflection of James' inner demons, and as the players progress through the game, they confronted with disturbing revelations about James and his past. The monsters he encounters are physical manifestation of his guilt and self-loathing, and the town itself seems to be punishing him for his sins. The remake does make some subtle changes to the presentation of the story, primarily through updated voice acting and more cinematic cutscenes. These changes help to modernize the storytelling, making it more accessible to new players, while still retaining the core elements what made the original story so powerful. However, as with any remake, there's always a risk of losing some of the magic what made the original so special. In Silent Hill 2's case, much of the horror came from its ambiguity. The game didn't spell everything out for the player. Instead, it left much up to interpretation. The remake, while faithful to the original, sometimes feel a bit more explicit in its storytelling, which could detract from the mysterious, open-ended nature of the original. At the end of the day, Silent Hill 2 is a horror game, and the big question is whether the remake can still deliver the same level of fear and tension as the original. The answer, for the most part, is yes. The remake excels at creating a tense, unsettling atmosphere with its improved visuals and sound design, working in tandem to keep players on edge. That said, the remake's improved clarity and detail can sometimes work against it. In the original, the fog and darkness often obscured your surroundings, focusing you to rely on your imagination to fill in the gaps. In the remake, the enchanted graphics make everything more visible, which can reduce some of the fear what comes from not knowing what's out there. So, where does what leave us? The Silent Hill 2 remake is a faithful reimagining of one of the greatest horror games of all time. It brings the classic story, atmosphere and characters into the modern era with updated visuals, sound design and gameplay mechanics. For new players, this remake is a fantastic way to experience Silent Hill 2 for the first time. It captures much of what made the original so special, while making it more accessible to a modern audience. However, for longtime fans of the series, the remake may not fully recapture the magic of the original. Some of the subtlety and ambiguity what made Silent Hill 2 so unique have been lost in translation, and the more polished visuals and controls, where improvements in some ways may detract from the raw, unsettling experience of the original. In the end, the Silent Hill 2 remake is a worthy successor to the original, but like any remake, it comes with its share of trade-offs. It's a must-play for fans of the series and anyone who loves psychological horror, but it's also a reminder what sometimes the imperfections of the past are what made it truly unforgettable. And as always, see you next time.